Well, hey there, and welcome to my almost midlife crisis. My name is Kevin Lowe, and I am stepping in for a brief moment before I turn you over to your host, Jennifer. Chances are, if you're digging my almost midlife crisis as much as me, you may very well like another podcast. It's called The Lowdown with Kevin Lowe, a podcast meant to inspire you, motivate you, and encourage you to get out and take on the day, no matter what obstacles may be standing in your way. Again, my podcast, it's The Lowdown with Kevin Lowe, available wherever you listen to podcasts. But most importantly, this is my almost midlife crisis. And it's time for me to turn you over to your host, Jennifer.
Well, hello there, and welcome to my almost midlife crisis, the show that dives into that tricky time in our lives when we're no longer young, but we definitely aren't old yet either. I'm your host, Jennifer Villamel. Whether you're the first one in your social circle to get pregnant, or in my case, the last, doing things on your own terms sometimes can leave you feeling a little lonely. I am so happy that we waited to start a family, but sometimes it feels like I missed the boat to experience it with my friends. And since I became pregnant, I felt the need to look outside my social circle to build connections with other women in the same life stage. And I found that this is actually a lot more common than we think it is. So if you're new to pregnancy or to motherhood and you're feeling a little lonely and wondering how to meet mommy friends, then this episode's for you. Let's dive in. Getting pregnant at 39 has its upsides. I feel more relaxed and ready than I was actually anticipating. I'm not sweating the small stuff or getting hung up on details that I know in the long run aren't really going to matter much. I'm focusing on enjoying the experience and taking in the pure amazement of what our bodies can do. I mean, think about it. When I went to my 20-week anatomy scan and saw actual organs and bones, like the images, evolve each time you get an ultrasound, right? Like the first one, it's like this small blob. And then the second one, it's a more defined blob that maybe somehow starts looking like a baby where you're like, is that their head? What is that? But now there's a skeleton in my body, which is crazy. Like my body produced human organs and a bone structure just from scratch. Talk about scratch cooking. And every time I feel my little girl kick in my belly, I'm reminded that while my clothes may be getting tighter, I'm growing a human child. And that's pretty remarkable. And this is not news to me. Like, I understand there is no stork. There's no, like, she's not just going to get dropped on our doorstep one day. Like, I'm obviously well aware that this is how it all works, but it's really is truly different experiencing it for myself. So, growing up, I wasn't sure if I wanted kids, but I figured if I had them, I would be going through this with my friends. Like we'd share stories and our kids would be similar ages and they would be all best friends just like us. And now fast forward to today, I'm almost 40 and I'm pregnant with my first and only child. And my three closest friends that were part of this fantasy have 8 children between them. The oldest being 13, which how did that happen? That makes me feel really old. And the youngest being 5. And the 4 of us have also lived in 3 separate states this whole time. So play dates aren't really like a thing. So don't get me wrong. They've been so great in terms of advice and being there when I want to discuss something baby related because they all get it because they've like been there, done that. But in some ways, I feel like I missed the opportunity to connect with them in the way that I had hoped and anticipated. Like they're past the pregnancy stage and they didn't have geriatric pregnancies, which maybe one of them was like just on the cusp of it when she became pregnant. But for the most part, they all had their kids prior, which makes a big difference. Because as much as I'd love to sit here and say that all the fear mongering we have to deal with by because just because we're waiting until after 35 to conceive is pointless. I would love to say that. There is a difference between a pregnancy prior to 35 and after. And while every pregnancy is different overall, every single one of them, there are added differences when you factor in the age of the mother. So let me give you an example. One of my friends was shocked that my doctor recommended that I induce labor on my due date if she hadn't come naturally. She was like, you're going to be 40 when you deliver. So if she doesn't come by your due date, then that's when it's happening. And are you okay with inducing? So, because it would decrease the risk for me. But for geriatric pregnancies, this is normal. I'll be 40 and there are added risks to labor and delivery. And if she makes it the full 40 weeks and doesn't come early, then there's greater risk for my health the longer I let her just rent out space in my uterus. And maybe my doctor is being extra cautious, but to me, that's not a bad thing. It's so important that my baby is healthy, 100%. I want her to be a healthy, happy baby, but my health is just as important to me. I want to be around and be healthy to see her grow up. So the more women in their 40s that gave birth that I speak to, the more common that I realize this process is. But if you didn't have, if this wasn't your pregnancy journey and you had kids younger, then it may seem unwarranted for you, right? That's not something that you had to deal with. But my doctor has my medical records, has my family's medical history. And also, this is her job. This is what she does. So it just was different. And it created this weird conversation where they just were shocked that was something I was considering. And I'm like, it's your pregnancy is different, right? I'm old. I'm having a kid and I'm old. It's just different. So while I do have some amazing support of these women in my life that have gone through pregnancy and motherhood before, they also don't live locally. I can't just go hang with them one Saturday or meet up with them during the week to check out some maternity clothes. We have a constant group text chain and we have monthly video chats, which are amazing. And I really look forward to them. But I still find myself yearning for connection with women that are local and are currently on the same stage, of pregnancy as I am. Especially at the beginning of the pregnancy, because I felt totally isolated and was desperate for connection. I will say I was at my lowest and loneliest during my first trimester. 3 days after I found out I was pregnant, Christian went out of town for 2 weeks, my 6th and 7th week of pregnancy. And coincidentally, these 2 weeks were my absolute worst in terms of pregnancy symptoms. I was exhausted, I was extremely nauseous, and I was unbearably constipated. And constipation is not something that I've really experienced in my life. It's not really an issue that I have. So for those of you that deal with it on a regular basis, I now have a whole new feeling of respect for you. How do you even function? I feel for you. I was so constipated. I had stomach pains and I couldn't even get off the couch at some point. And thankfully, this really only lasted until I worked with my doctor and found Colace, which was a godsend. But those 2 weeks until I started taking the supplement were pure hell. But the physical symptoms were only part of my hell. The mental struggle was the other part. It was dead of winter still in Chicago. This was February. And I was cooped up. I was alone at home. And it was way too early to be telling people that I'm pregnant. So I couldn't just call someone and talk to them about how I was feeling. I have never felt more isolated and alone. And I didn't want to meet anyone in person because I felt horrible. I didn't know how to explain how I felt without giving away that I was pregnant. And I also felt like I was just going to fall asleep at any moment. So I didn't really have the energy for any sort of sustained social interaction at the time. I was like, what if I go and then halfway through, I just want to go take a nap. So I mean, let's face it, I didn't even feel like I was showering some of those days, right? Like, I mean, we're talking just survival mode. I was barely making it through the workday, and then I was just like binging Netflix because that's about all I could do. And I was bored out of my mind and I was lonely. And when people talk about getting pregnant, I feel like they leave that part out. Like they leave out how isolating the first trimester can be, especially if you're older and pregnant, because you're even more hesitant to really share the news too soon in case something goes wrong. And maybe some people like having that little secret between them and their partner, but I didn't. Like I'm a social person. I feel the need to share with others. Hell, I have a damn podcast that talks about like my inner thoughts and feelings. Like I'm not what you call a private person or an introvert. I get my energy from being around others. So being physically and mentally isolated took a real toll on me at the beginning. I was dying to tell anyone I was pregnant and to be able to talk about it. So when we finally were ready to tell our friends and family, I was about 11 weeks along. Like we had waited to go to our first prenatal because we wanted to get that like doctor's thumbs up. And we also waited until after our results came back from the first round of prenatal genetic testing, just to make sure that there was nothing we had to worry about. And of course, everyone was so excited when we told them. Like Christian's parents and they are first time grandparents were ecstatic, right? And my parents couldn't be more excited to finally have a grandkid from me after all these years of asking me when the hell it was going to happen. And my brother and our friends and all of them were just over the moon for us. And for the first time, it actually felt like we could get excited and like maybe this was the fun part, right? Because now we could actually talk about it. But it didn't take long to notice this slight change in how we connected with those in our lives. Because outside of my long distance college friends that are mothers, my local social network is the exact opposite. Like my closest friends don't have kids, and more than half of them actually just don't want them, which is fine for them. Like that's their choice. I have no qualms about that. I think just as much as women choose to have kids, women should be able to choose not to have kids. Like that's that's your prerogative. And I will say that they have been really great since I've become pregnant. Like they've never acted annoyed if I bring up baby stuff and they are totally supportive of my journey. And really the support is in the little things like when we hung out at a friend's house and they always make sure that I have some non-alcoholic drink available that's not just like water. And I appreciate that. Or one time they brought me like a rainbow cake because they knew I had developed a sweet tooth. It's like these small acts that mean a lot to me because it's really their way of going out of their way to make sure that I feel included. And that means a lot. But on the flip side, it also feels like there's less opportunity to connect in person because let's face it, alcohol played a big role in my life pre-pregnancy. I mean, I wasn't like an alcoholic or anything, but you go to dinners with the girls and you spend hours chatting over some wine or you grab margaritas on like a beautiful summer day and just like people watch and kind of just like chat about nothing. And in Chicago, a lot of our social life revolves around alcohol. So since I've been pregnant, it just feels like if I want to avoid being around people drinking, I would have to pretty much become a hermit and like just stay home. And while they try to do their best to include me, being the sober one at the party is never as fun. I mean, I never really experienced that when I was younger, but it's not fun. I just get more tired while they are starting to get like their second and their third wins and like ready to go. And the bigger I get, the harder it is for me to join in the inevitable dance party that usually breaks out after a certain number of cocktails, which listen, normally I would be the one leading the dance party, right? Like I'd be the DJ and I would like lead the dance party, but now it's getting uncomfortable to like dance. So the last thing that I want to do is also be the Debbie Downer that's the first one to leave the party because like that's not my style. Like I'm usually one of the last ones to leave the party. And in fairness, I will say that I am happy to play the designated driver for my husband for this limited time because between the two of us, I'm the bigger drinker and usually the one that wants to keep the party going. So in our almost 11-year relationship, he's taken the role of designated driver. Not always literally, because listen, we live in Chicago. Like we're not driving all over the place to like bars and restaurants. Like you're taking a taxi, you're taking public transit, you're taking an Uber. But we do live downtown and he always makes sure that he plays the responsible party, making sure that I get home okay. And I see women kind of boast that, oh, my husband, like he's so supportive and he's not drinking during my pregnancy to support me. Like that's cute. But that's not happening here. I mean, good for you if he's doing that. Like that's really sweet. But Christian's not doing that. And you know what? He shouldn't. Like I don't expect him to. I actually don't want him to. Like Christian is finishing up his master's. So he has a pretty packed social calendar right now. And he's taking full advantage of it for these last couple of months with his classmates. And I want him to. Like he should be able to do that and not feel guilty. Just because I can't drink doesn't mean I have the right to ask other people around me not to. And I want to support him through this journey. And like, you know what? Go enjoy it while you can before the baby comes, you know? God knows I didn't hold back when I was around pregnant people. In fact, fun story. When my brother's ex-wife held a baby shower for my niece, there was no alcohol. So my mom and my aunt and I had all driven to Minnesota from Chicago for the shower. And when we arrived, we realized there was nothing to drink other than soda, water, or punch. Oh, and also the shower was like 6 hours plus. It was like the longest shower I've ever been to. And my aunt and I immediately rectified the situation by grabbing the keys to the rental car, which was a bright lime green Mazda hatchback. And we drove to the liquor store. And I mean, that freaking car. We only rented a car because my mom lives in Florida and she flew to Chicago so we could all drive together. So obviously she didn't have her car, and my aunt only had a Mini, which the three of us, so it'd be like a clown car driving to with like our bags and everything, driving to Minnesota. Like, no one wanted to do that. And I didn't have a car at the time, so we just rented one to drive up together. So my mom orders this economy 4-door sedan, something like that. And when I got there, they were out and they were going to give us a small SUV as like a quote unquote upgrade. Well, my mom did not want to pay for the added gas for this car. So she opted for a compact, basically a downgrade instead of the upgrade, which I don't know. Personally, I would have went with the upgrade. So what do they give us? They give us this like tiny green machine that the three of us and our bags barely fit into. At that point, the Mini would have been a better option. And we drove up to Minnesota and we had to drive back in a snowstorm in this thing. But anyway, it was a riot. But we snuck to the liquor store during the baby shower. And we got some alcohol and then we spiked our punch. Only our punch, not the whole party. Because, if people don't want to drink, that's their choice. But we spiked our punch to help us deal with just like the hours and hours of baby games and gift openings that day. And my now ex-sister-in-law pretty much threw a fit and complained to my brother. But you know what? I stick by our decision. Like if you're going to ask people to sit around all day and talk about your baby, at least give them a mimosa or two. Okay. That is bad planning on her part. Like know your audience. Like when I have my baby shower, you better believe there is a cocktail that will be offered. Like I would never do my people like that. Okay. We're actually having palomas because this is going to happen in the summer. So we're going to have palomas specifically because I actually found a non-alcoholic tequila. I don't I know that's very confusing. There's actually no tequila in it. It's from the brand Ritual, but if you include it, it just tastes like tequila. I don't know what they do. It's magic. But if you include it in like margarita mix or a Paloma, it tastes like an actual margarita or Paloma. And so you know what? It's been my vibe this summer because it makes me feel like I'm having a margarita, even though I'm not. And then I just have to deal with like the heartburn that comes along with being pregnant. But you know what? Sacrifices. So we're gonna have Palomas, and you can choose the fake alcohol or the real alcohol. But like, I'm not gonna just like not let anyone drink at my baby shower. So anyway, I encourage Christian to take full advantage of my sober status because time is limited, and we're gonna go back to our previous roles once the baby arrives, and even more so because my tolerance is gonna be the lowest it's been since freshman year of college, which I'm really excited about. It's insane how much less we spend at restaurants right now, like without my drinks racking up the tab. So we're going to enjoy it while it lasts. Like just the other night, we went to dinner and our tab, like normally in Chicago, when we go out to eat, like my brother always laughs that every time he goes to eat with us, it's like $100 a person. And he's like, what the hell? Because he lives in the suburbs. So he's not used to like these prices. So he'll always be like, every time I go to a restaurant with you guys, it's like $100 a person. And it is actually kind of hard to find a place if you're having alcohol that's going to be less than $100 a person. Well, let me tell you what. Since I've been pregnant, we have like the whole bill is less than $100. It's like a whole new world. And I order dessert. I order probably like more food than I would normally. But because the alcohol is not there, like we went out to dinner the other night and the bill was $78. We were like, this is amazing, which is probably good too because I'm not working. So I probably shouldn't be spending like a ton of money at restaurants. But needless to say, well, my Chicago friends have been super supportive. And listen, they're doing their best to make me feel included. It's not the same. Like I'm really conscious about how much I talk about my pregnancy or baby planning because I don't want to bore them or talk about something that they can't really relate to. I love my friends, but I still find myself yearning for connection with other pregnant people. But I had no idea where to start. Like making friends when you're older is hard enough as it is, let alone when you aren't working and you're pregnant. So, how was I going to find my sense of community during this time? Well, first I turned to my passions, and one of them was Peloton. I'm an avid Peloton fanatic. Outside of my Pilates reformer class, which I go to, I am exclusively using the Peloton app for all of my workouts, from walks to the bike, to bar class, to yoga, to stretching, to strength training, like you name it. My username is Pello Cult Member if you want to follow me. Because honestly, it's an accurate description of my love for those brands. Like I'm actually really bummed that they are finally reopening the New York studios and I'm pregnant because I have a friend that's also super into Peloton, and we had always talked about like, oh, when they reopen, we should do a weekend trip and then we can just take as many classes as we can with all of our favorite instructors, which maybe to some people, they're like, wow, I'm going to take a weekend trip to New York to work out. Like that does not sound like a good weekend, but I really want to do that one day, but I don't want to do that if I'm pregnant. I want to do that when I can show up strong on the leaderboard and like take advantage of the competitive nature of an in-person class, not when I have to like modify because I'm pregnant. But there's this huge group of Peloton moms and moms to be out there. And so I joined this Facebook group called Peloton Pregos and Postpartum. And not only can we connect on pregnancy, but also our love for Peloton. So it's like a win-win. And I also joined a Facebook group called Pregnancy After 40, which has been so helpful in terms of just conversations and tips specifically regarding geriatric pregnancies. So that's been great. But both of these groups are just online, right? Although randomly, I did find out that one of our friends that lives in the burbs is actually part of the Peloton group, which is hilarious. Because at one point I was like, I think she might actually already know I'm pregnant because I didn't realize she was part of this group and I posted something. But I haven't met anyone from these groups in real life. So after some further digging, I actually found this social app called Peanut, which is such a cute name. But the app is entirely dedicated to pregnant women and moms. And there's groups you can join that are relevant to you. Like I'm part of the October 2022 babies for all of us that are due in October. Or there's like a Chicago group so I can connect with other moms that are local. Although there's a lot of burbs people in there, and I'm like, you're not really in Chicago, okay? Like, I mean, I know you're like in Chicago land, but it's like it's not the same. There are live conversations that you can join with experts or just other members, and you can have one-on-one matching, which is almost like Tinder, but for moms. So you get different profiles, and then like you swipe up, which is called a wave if you want to connect, or down if you don't. And then you have text conversations right there in the app. And at first, it's kind of weird because it feels like you're dating, but you're really just connecting with potential friends. So it's fun. So what makes me, I know you're probably curious, like, well, what makes you swipe up or down? So you know what? I know that's always a question. And it's like when someone's on the dating app and you wonder, like, why did they pick you or not? Okay, I'll share my consideration set for my swipes with you. And hopefully I don't piss anyone off in the process, but whatever. They're my swipes. So first of all, I look for their location. If they're in the burbs, that's a no. That's a no for me. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm looking for people that I can meet in person. And the reality is that once people move to the burbs, they pretty much move to another state. Like you're not going to go see them other than like a once in a while. And it's pretty much like a digital relationship. And that's not really what I'm like trying to do. I don't really need more digital relationships. I have a Peloton group for that. So if someone lives 45 minutes away and that's with no traffic, like you're not going to go meet them for a walk in the park, or you're not going to go meet them for like a quick lunch. Okay. It's now turned into like a whole ordeal where you have to like plan ahead of time and like drive out there. So sorry, burbs, no go for me. That's a swipe down. Also, I usually swipe down if someone is in their 20s. Sorry, you might call me an ageist, but I'm looking to connect with people in the same life stage as me. Like pregnant or not, I don't have a ton in common with someone that's 25. Okay. Our lives are different and our pregnancies are different. So sorry, I prefer to connect with moms to be that are at least in their 30s. And I'll also try to focus on first time moms. I've connected with some that have another child because maybe they live really close to me or we have a lot of interests in common, but I do have experienced mothers in my life already. So I really wanted to focus on first time moms to experience this together. And then hobbies are really like my last one. Like I try to focus on people that we have stuff in common. Like, do they have full-time jobs and do they like to travel and are they into fitness? And I know what you're saying, like you're not working. So why are you only looking to connect with full-timers, right? Well, I mean, the answer is simple. I know that I'm not going to be a stay-at-home mom. I have all the respect for them in the world, but like that's not my journey. And I'm too career-minded for that. And I want to make friends with women that we can hopefully have our kids have play dates later. Then if that's the case, I want to make friends with moms that will also be working moms. So we have more in common and more to connect on. So those are basically my filters, like location, age, first time moms, hobbies and interests. And, after a little online conversation a couple weeks ago, I actually finally met some of these women in real life. So a couple weeks ago, it was like a beautiful Sunday. I met a group of 6 women from Peanut for lunch, and I was so excited about it. Like I was looking forward to it all week. And you know what? It's been a long time since I tried making new friends. Though, like it just, I don't know. I have my group of friends, and it felt a bit intimidating because as we get older, it's so much harder to make friends. Like maybe you meet people at work, maybe like my husband if you're getting your MBA, but it seems like the older we get, the more set in our social circle we become. So I was feeling a little rusty on the friends front, and I was a little nervous about just showing up at a restaurant when I didn't know any of the people I was meeting. So when I arrived, I walk up to the host and I couldn't remember whose name the reservation was under. So I was like, "Hey, I'm here meeting like a party of 6 pregnant people." And I mean, I thought that that was something that would be easily identifiable for her, but either she wasn't aware they were pregnant or she was just being nice. She looked at me with like this blank stare, and I was like, okay, strike one. And I was now hoping that I wouldn't end up striking out after riding my bike to this neighborhood with such high hopes. But after searching in the app for the name, she brought me to the table. Even though I had never met these women, the second I sat down, I just felt welcomed. Like everyone was so nice and friendly and just curious. And I was immediately bombarded with questions. And it felt so nice just to be able to freely talk about my pregnancy with women that were in the exact same boat. I had to remind myself to even ask questions too, because I'm sure they also yearn to be able to just talk about their experience just as much as I did. And I have to admit, like, sometimes I can be bad at that. Like, I'm not the best at that, especially in groups. I tend to take over the conversation and then I talk about myself a lot and then I forget to ask others questions. And I blame this on my upbringing because in my family, they care about what you thought and but it didn't seem like anyone ever tried hard to probe or ask you what you thought. Like if you had something to say, you said it. And if you weren't saying anything, you must not have anything that you really wanted to share with anyone. So, during one-on-one conversations, I'm much better at like the back and forth conversation style, and I'll ask plenty of questions. But in a group, sometimes I revert to like my old ways and I just assume people will jump in if they have something that they want to add. And as I've gotten older, I have worked on this because I know how much of an issue this can be, not only with friends, but especially in the business setting. But I also have a friend of mine that is the opposite of me. And like her excellence in this area is a constant reminder to me that I still have work to do. So everyone has a different story. I was one of the few from the Chicago area. Most were from out of state originally, and there was even one from Canada. Two were going through IVF and were going on this journey solo, which was so inspiring to me. Like I was just talking about how I felt so isolated when Christian was out of town, but at least I could call or text him. I can't even imagine going through this alone, especially adding IVF to the mix. Like I just found it so amazing that they just knew what they wanted and they were ready now, partner or not. It's a very empowering message in my eyes. And everyone had an interesting story, and we had a great time sharing pregnancy stories, but also how our families and loved ones played a role in all of it and what their reactions were and all that good stuff. And you know what? I didn't have to be the sober one, and I didn't have to worry about talking about the baby too much. And I got some good ideas out of it. One of the 7 women, or out of the 7 women there, I seem to have more of a connection with 2 in particular, which is normal, right? Because you naturally connect with some better than others, because I mean, that's life. You aren't going to connect with everyone on the same level when you're in a party of 7 women. Plus, I'm trying to build a more long-term mommy tribe. So you're going to meet a lot of amazing women. But just like in other parts of your life, you aren't going to have the same relationship with each one of them. So the longer the lunch went on, the more the 3 of us seemed to gravitate towards each other in conversation. So leaving lunch, I felt hopeful and energized, and more so than I had in months. And the whole way home, I was just like riding my bike with a smile on my face because this feeling of loneliness started to slip away. I even worked up the courage to reach out to the 2 women to meet up with them for like one-on-one like dates. Like, is that what you call it? Is it a date? I don't know. It sounds kind of silly to me. That I met these strangers from a pregnancy social app, but at the same time, I was really excited. Like maybe had I started to create my local mommy tribe. So in season 1, I talked about how different people in our lives serve different purposes. And there are different levels of relationships. And while the people in your circle should always bring positivity to your life, they do it in different ways. And when you're raising kids, They say it takes a village, but if you don't have a village, then what do you do? Well, first, you evaluate the village you do have. For me, my college friends know me the best. And while our kids may be different ages, we will be able to connect on a whole new level, which is motherhood, which I'm really excited about. My local social circle will really enable us to not lose our sense of selves when we become parents. Because while I know that will change after 40 years old, 40 years of living, I also know who I am. And it's important to have people in my life that know and love us for who we are as a man and a woman, not just mother and father. And then there's these new relationships that are forming in hopes of having a local in-person support group that understands the stage in life and is going through the journey with us. Just like pre-pregnancy, we get to choose our tribe. So consider who's in your life and what role they'll play once the baby comes. And you know what? It's okay if this new stage has produced some new gaps. There are folks in the same boat, so don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Join me on my social channels, get more content and inspiration. You can follow my Almost Midlife Crisis on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also check out my new YouTube channel with videos of the episodes and shorts to keep you entertained all week. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you are always up to date on the latest episodes. Sign up for written transcripts delivered right to your inbox at myalmostmidlifecrisis.com. Until next time.